Welcome to We're at the Age from Voice St. Louis.
We're at the age to have hard conversations. At Voice, we get busier in the months after Christmas. That's because many times families have gone to visit an aging loved one and realized they've changed. They're a little worse off than they were last year, and having those conversations can be so hard. We brought in Melanie Maynor to help us tackle some delicate ways to approach topics like taking car keys or downsizing. These ideas are great for aging loved ones in our lives and also help us to think about our own aging process and how we can be intentional about aging.
So some of our listeners out there, and I think maybe even some of us, are at the age where we're starting to have hard conversations with the older adults in our life, whether it's, who's going to be managing medication, when is it time to give up the car keys, when is it time to make a move, all of those really difficult questions. And so sometimes we're at that age to have hard conversations.
Yeah, and so we're here today with Melanie Maynor from Aging Gracefully, and she deals with these kinds of issues on a daily basis. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Aging Gracefully?
Sure. We do what's called geriatric care management or care management. We are helping people navigate everything related to aging and adults with disability. I say creating a plan of care and then overseeing that plan of care. We love it when people plan ahead, but oftentimes people call us because they're already in some sort of crisis and we're helping them navigate that.
Yeah. What is the balance between number of people who have done some to a lot of planning to people who have done almost no planning?
When they call us?
Yeah.
I would say probably 85% of the calls that we get are people that are already in some sort of crisis.
Okay.
Major or minor
Yeah.
crisis. Something's happening that's causing the family some stress.
Yeah, I could see that. So do you get a lot of people who maybe have a loved one just coming out of a hospital, aren't quite sure what to do, people who are not living near that person? What do your clients look like?
Sure. A lot of people are at the hospital. They had a hospitalization for something, a new diagnosis, a fall. They came home for some sort of visit or holiday and realized their parents are not doing well. I think it's easy to sound pretty good over the phone, but not look as good as you sound. Mm-hmm. So maybe the family is living far away. Sometimes families have been doing a lot of the care themselves, and we've seen that coming out of COVID. Families were taking care of things themselves, and then they just become tired and overwhelmed by the care. Also, families are always complicated. Oftentimes there's difficulty amongst the family making decisions and agreeing and moving those things forward. So.
Yeah, those are absolutely some of the issues we see with our Voice Connect helpline is people who, I can't tell you the number of calls we get in early January of people going, we got to do something with mom. Mm-hmm. And then, just what are we going to do and kind of walking through. And quite honestly, we often refer those folks to geriatric care managers because you guys are the people that have all of the resources and kind of know what to do in those situations. So it's a really great resource for people.
Yeah, I mean, geriatric care managers, we're really kind of quarterbacking the whole situation, connecting them with resources and then overseeing those resources as we kind of move those things down the field. And that's really as far as I can go with football analogies. But, kind of making sure all the systems are moving in the same direction is really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and that's hard work for caregivers.
Yes.
For family members to do. And I suppose in a lot of ways, having a geriatric care manager makes it so that family members can be family members and not necessarily direct caregivers every moment of the day.
Sure. I like to say that hopefully we're freeing you up to just have regular conversations with your parents or your loved ones so that every conversation isn't about the care. But, the other thing is it doesn't really matter what we do for a living or how good we are at it. When we're invested in it emotionally, we're just not going to be able to think as clearly. I mean, I advocate for people for a living, but if my kid's the one in the emergency room, my head and my heart are mixed up in there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm still not going to be a good advocate, even though that's my job. Yeah. So we all need someone that just has a little bit more perspective that's outside of the family system. I mean, just the fact that we're a little bit removed gives us an advantage over somebody that's in the system.
Yeah, and I can imagine a lot of our listeners are in sort of that sandwich generation where you've got younger kids, older parents, older family members, and so a lot of them don't know a lot of the resources that are available. So I think getting in touch with a geriatric care manager is probably the best first step to get connected to what the options are.
Sure. I mean, it's overwhelming. Aging, disability, they have their own language. Just, I say it's a little bit like taxes. You can either figure out taxes yourself or you can get a CPA. You can figure out aging and disability yourself, or you can get a geriatric care manager. Hopefully, we are kind of boiling down that information for you, letting you know who's out there, who does what, who pays for it, who's good at it. You know, those are the sorts of things that we are helping you figure out.
Tickets are on sale right now for Voice's first ever fashion show for older adults and people with disabilities. The Timeless Elegance fashion show is going to be on April 26th. And let me tell you, folks, tickets are going to sell out for this one. Be sure that you're a part of the great time that we're going to have by going to voicestl.org/fashion show to get your tickets and more information. And by the way, guys, this is a brunch thing. No need to stay up all night for this event. So you're going to love it. voicestl.org/fashion show.
So what does it mean to be intentional about aging? We've heard that term a couple times. What does that mean?
Well, you know, I think that in other seasons of life, we were chatting earlier, I have a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old, so we're spending a lot of time, and we have over the last couple of years, like, what's next? Are we going to college? What do we want to do for a living? Those sorts of things. I'm about pushing 50 pretty soon. What do I want to do in my 50s? So we have all these other seasons of life where we're kind of thinking about, what do I want this to look like? And I think it's easy as we get older, especially as we're aging, to stop doing that, right? It doesn't sound fun to think of aging. It doesn't sound fun to think of end-of-life things. And so we just stop intending, right? We stop thinking about what we want it to look like because we don't want to think about it. But I think it's just like every other season. You know, lots of people want to stay at home. But in order to stay at home, we have to make some intentional choices, right? It's doing things to help ourselves not fall in our house. It's doing those little minor things like getting things out of the way so that we don't trip on them. It's making good choices like having our legal paperwork in place and looking at our finances and knowing what we can afford. It's making all those preemptive choices to set ourselves up to be ready for any of the things that come, and having conversations with our family members in advance. It's just thinking ahead about what you want it to look like when you're not already in the situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And now I think a lot of people might be put in the situation where that family member is already in a place where they need to have maybe a hard conversation. So how can our listeners prepare for having those delicate conversations? Like maybe it's time to install some extra railings. Maybe it's time to take away the car keys or sell the house. How do we sort of broach those subjects?
Sure. Well, piggybacking on what I just said, I think as much as you can have any of these conversations along the way when you're not already in the situation is gold, right? If you're not already hurt or in crisis, it's so much easier to have those conversations. So I will just remind you of that. But, you know, I think none of us want to feel like we're under attack, right? I think it's easy to forget what it might feel like for someone to take away our independence. And a lot of times when you're aging or you've had an injury or you're hurt or you've gotten a new diagnosis, a lot of things are changing for you. And oftentimes I think as an adult child, we have a lot of fear. And so our brains are saying, I want to protect them. But as a parent, we're saying, I still want to be me. And so it's really hard to hear each other. Trying to have those conversations as graciously as we can. I think remembering that we are not going to accomplish everything all at once. I think having radical change all at once is hard. And even as a care manager, unless it's really unsafe, I'm not going to go in there and change everything all at one time. Just slowly having those conversations, slowly making those changes, giving the aging person as much voice as we can in all of those decisions. Okay, Mom, I think we do need some railings here. What do you want those to look like? You want them to be black? Well, I kind of want them to be brown, but that's okay. We're going to go with black. Giving them any kind of say that you can give them and as much voice in it as you can. I think it's also sometimes an opportunity to use an outsider. Do you have a professional that can speak into those places and they're not going to be sitting around the table with your family later at the holidays?
Right.
I mean, sometimes that's when you need to use someone that's just removed from the family system to kind of initiate that hard conversation and say, well, remember when Dr. So-and-so said, it doesn't seem very safe to drive the car. Maybe we need to hear what he said to us, or, whatever those things are. That's a place to use use your professionals. Sometimes as care managers, we're starting those hard conversations and being a little bit of the bad guy for family members because I'm not going to be. I always say I'm not going to be sitting there at Thanksgiving, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
You can be upset with me because I'm not your daughter,
Right.
And that's good. That's okay. And sometimes just having somebody take a little bit off of that, or sometimes starting those conversations is what we're doing. Is we're just saying, hey, we need to talk about your driving. It's oftentimes hard for family members to even just start the conversation.
Well, there's that kind of respect of your parents, and they still expect that respect in a lot of ways. So, when you have somebody from the outside coming in and they're an expert in that field, a lot of times it's heard a lot easier than sometimes when, your kid's saying it. And I think in some parents' minds, your kids are always going to be your kids, your little kids.
100%. And I can walk in and say the exact same thing as your daughter's been telling you, and you'll do it.
Yep.
Just because I'm a social worker. And I know that's super frustrating,
Yeah.
And same thing for my parents, right? They listen to other professionals more than me, even though I do it for a living. So
The
it's
funny
just
thing
how it
is, kids do that too.
Yeah.
A parent can tell them to do something, and they're like, "Oh, Mom," but then
Yeah.
their friends tell them, and they're like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah.
Funny.
We all do that to people. So.
Yeah.
So what do you do in a situation where you go into a situation and you maybe recommend giving up the keys or installing railings or, taking a certain course of action, and the older adult really responds poorly to both you and their family? How do you navigate that?
Well, let me just say, it's rare that people are like, "Oh, great, let's do it."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the way I kind of think about it in my mind is I kind of think about like, I'm going to set that down and I'm just going to keep circling back. And then sort of in my mind, I think I'm like kind of circling up. I'm just going to be taking baby steps, moving you in the direction that I want to go. We're going to just be making those steps incrementally and not drastically. And that's hard. Occasionally we do have to take a drastic step, but oftentimes we don't. And so if I can make incremental changes, little changes, that's what I'm going to do. Just gaining trust, making those incremental changes, little baby steps, because it's hard. Nobody wants somebody to come into their house and just drastically change everything.
Yeah.
I don't want that. So just thinking about even for yourself, what would it feel like to you if someone came in and did all of these things?
That's a hard thing. And I
hard.
think in a lot of ways, when we have a loved one who's in a situation where they need more help, we want everything to be right immediately. And we want it to all be exactly how it should be. And that's a great, perfect situation.
Sure.
But it's not reality for most of us. And I think that that's the thing a lot of caregivers beat themselves up with, because I can't, get the books on tape and the car's keys given up and the house perfect and, all the medication managed perfectly. You do all of that stuff the day after somebody comes home from the hospital, which sometimes I feel like might be the expectation that's set.
Sure.
And it's hard.
No, none of us can do that. That's impossible. We're not going to be able to think of those things. There's oftentimes just not enough time, right? Even for us, sometimes as care managers, we can't get all of those things accomplished especially when you're in crisis. And that's why you're just doing the best that you can. I think it's like any other season of life where you have guilt, as a mom, sometimes you feel like I'm not doing enough, or at work, I'm not doing enough. As a partner, you don't feel like you're doing enough. So there's it as a child, oftentimes you don't, or a caregiver, you feel like you're not doing enough. So there's always that guilt to contend with. But, I think it's doing the best that you can every day and taking more steps. We talk about on our team at Aging Gracefully that we use the term the dignity of risk. One of my team members, Mara, talks about that a lot, and that we all have really the opportunity to have some risk, right? And when we're younger, we take risks that we don't maybe allow people as they age to take because we're scared of those risks. So we all have a different risk tolerance too. So what I'm willing to let my parents risk, my sister might not be willing to. In my case, my sister might have a higher risk tolerance than me. But I mean, so we also have that sometimes within the family system where we don't all have the same risk tolerance. And so some people think we should have rails on everything, and other people think that's too much. And so oftentimes getting the parents and the siblings and everyone on board with what we're going to tolerate is hard work, and trying to make those changes is difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see that in some of the family situations I've been in where, we want to put a big protective ball around somebody and they don't want that. And it's just really rude of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And no matter what we do, we can't control everything. No matter where we put someone, whether they're at home or in a community, we can't perfectly protect anybody, hard as we try. And I think that's hard. That's just hard to sit with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you worried that you can't do it all anymore, and maybe you or a loved one needs a long-term care option, maybe a nursing home or an assisted living option, and you're not sure what's right for you? We know here at Voice that finding the right support can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. One call to the Voice Connect helpline, and you'll be connected with an expert who can help guide you through the process. Whether you're wondering about care levels, financing options like Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, or paying out of pocket, or if you need a specific recommendation that matches your needs, Voice Connect is here for you. We're more than just information. We're your partner in finding the right care. You're just one call away from peace of mind. Call 314-919-2403. That's 314-919-2403.
I know sometimes families jump pretty quickly from living at home in a long-time home to, my loved one needs to go to the nursing home permanently. And I know there's a lot of steps that can be had in between those. But when you're looking at it may be time to start thinking about somebody moving out of their homes. What kind of signs are you looking for that maybe our listeners can be looking for in their lives?
Sometimes it's just how the home is set up, right? Are there too many steps? Are there no bathrooms on the first floor, and we can't do steps anymore? So, we're kind of like, are we adding a bathroom downstairs, or are we moving? So sometimes it's really literally, how is the house set up, and how accessible is it? Do we want to put money in making changes into the house? I think that's where, again, we go back to looking at things preemptively. If you really want to stay in your home and you don't have a bathroom on the first floor, you might want to think about that, right? And plan ahead for it. So sometimes it's simple logistics like that. A lot of times it's how much time do we have to manage it? Because sometimes managing things at home, we can do a lot of things at home, and I think that's great that we have the opportunity to do that now, but it takes a lot of oversight. And so it may just depend on how available people are to manage that, whether they want to have a care manager overseeing that, whether someone in the family has the time to oversee all those moving parts. Sometimes it comes down to finances. When you start looking at care around the clock, that sometimes is the tipper. So there's not really, I would say, a one size fits all. I think that sometimes it starts to be what the family feels like they can tolerate. When it becomes really stressful for the family, we start thinking about, okay, does this mean maybe it's time to look at moving? Would that decrease the stress load? Would that make things easier for the family? Is usually what I'm kind of gauging it on.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, because it is so depends on the person. I know.
Yeah.
I've
talked a lot about my uncle on the show. He's a 91-year-old man. He doesn't use the stove, hasn't really ever used the stove.
Right.
He gave up the keys a long time ago. There's no car to drive. And so a lot of the things that, we might worry about kind of are taken out of that. And luckily he moved into a house that's pretty accessible to him. Which, one story, we got rid of the rugs a long time ago. So,
Sure.
Those kind of easy things that you can do to help somebody remain in their home. We still have family members that go, should he be in the nursing home? And, there's always a difference there.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that goes back to risk tolerance again. And as a care manager, it doesn't matter to me which one. I mean, we're just trying to help your family make the decision that works for your family. And I don't think, honestly, that one is better than the other. I think that it, just like anything else in life, it just depends on the family and it depends on the person. Neither choice is perfect, We just have to figure out what works for the family in their scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. My great grandma, who I've talked about before, lived in her own home for 80 years until she was 108. And they installed railings and they did their best to make sure she was safe. And sometimes you can make it work.
Sure. My grandmother lived in her home until she was 97. We're also seeing lots of changes in what we're doing at home. I mean, technology, all of that. So the things that we can do at home are incredible and I think expanding daily.
And you mentioned that care managers can also do work with people who have disabilities. What does that look like in a lot of situations?
We have found that initially we were getting calls for parents who are aging and they have an adult child with a disability. And I mean, when I say adult child, that person may be 60. And they really all needed a plan of care. So we brought in a care manager that's specifically versed in the areas of disability. But, we've found that they're just like aging, disability, and we work with people, I would say 21 and above, just creating a plan of care. What does that look like for their independence and their life goals, just helping them set up their own plan of care and with their parents. And there are a lot of similarities in discussions around family dynamics, risk tolerance. Oftentimes we've really been protective of our children with disabilities, and so it's hard to see them step out in independence. And so helping families have those conversations, helping them have conversations with siblings about what do we want the plan to be if something were to happen to the parents or when the parents are no longer able to provide the care, looking at the same things like finances and legal and making sure that we have all of those things in place. So a lot of overlap, just maybe the resources are slightly different for aging and disability.
Are you a nursing home resident or family member with stories to share? We need your help to participate in the Missouri state legislative process by voicing concerns or support on various bills. No experience is necessary. We will support everyone with resources and information along the way. To find out more about the Missouri Alliance for Long-Term Care Reform, visit voicestl.org/alliance.
We do a lot of work with professionals in home care. I would say we do a lot of work with attorneys, elder law attorneys, financial advisors. Oftentimes people have ongoing relationships with their attorneys or their financial advisors, and they've been kind of preparing for this, and now they need someone to help them put it in place. We do, hospitals, people in hospitals, we get referrals from. Oftentimes we are working with churches. Maybe churches or our faith communities have been helping families, and then it's just more than they have capacity. So we're working alongside them to provide some help.
A lot of really great people in those care teams that sometimes we don't even think about.
Sure.
That's wonderful. So if somebody thinks that maybe using a care manager might be right for their family, what would be a first step for them to go looking for a care manager? What should they be looking for?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always worth having a conversation. Nationally, I don't know how big this podcast is, so I'm going to say it's huge. But if you...
we love that.
Yeah. If there are care managers, all over, at least I know nationally, and you can go to our national association, which is the Aging Life Care Association. It's aginglifecare.org, and you can put in your zip code, and it will tell you if there's a care manager in your zip code. And help you locate that. So if you're in California or wherever your parents live in Idaho, you can see if there's a care manager in your region. I know for us here at Aging Gracefully, I'm always happy for people to call and just talk about what you have going on. We will do a free meet and greet with families and just see if it's something that we may be able to help you with. If not, we're happy to suggest what might be helpful to you. That's our role, just to kind of get you started where you need to go. If we're helpful to your family, or if we think another scenario is helpful, we'll point you in the right direction.
So clients could even contact you if they don't know exactly what they need. So it could either be, hey, I think we need ABC, or help me, I don't know what we need.
Yes. I mean, I would say lots of the calls that we get are help me, and I'm happy to have those calls because you don't know what you need, and you don't know, like we just talked about, you don't know the language of aging. And so feel free to call and say, here's our scenario, and we'll say, oh, care management, this is how we could help you. No, you really don't need me, but you need XYZ. Let me give you that phone number, and we're happy to do that.
Now, one of the big questions we get a lot is it expensive? Pretty much with anything we recommend.
Yeah.
So I know obviously like everywhere, everybody's different, but if somebody's looking for care management, what's the pricing they should be thinking about?
What should they mentally prepare for?
Yeah. Well, everything's expensive now, right?
Yeah.
Care management, I would say, is a little bit of a luxury service. And in some senses, it's unfortunately not covered by insurance. Some long-term care insurance policies will pay some for care management. At Aging Gracefully, we primarily are private pay. So I would say the range on care management in the St. Louis region that I'm aware of is probably somewhere between $135 an hour to maybe $175 an hour.
Okay.
Most care managers, I think, are billing by the hour. Now, if I were to hear that myself, I would say, wow, that's a lot of money. And it is a lot of money, but I know at Aging Gracefully, the way I think about it is we're going to meet with you and talk to you about what works for your family. And some families are going to say, great, come in and fix everything for many, many hours. And we're happy to do that. And some families are going to say, I can't afford all of that, but I can afford a few hours for some coaching. And, we're happy to come in and say, tell us what's going on. Let me help you create a plan, and you run with that plan. And so I think it's good to think about care management in the sense that you can use it on a small scale, you can use it on a large scale, and we're going to tailor it to what you need and what you can afford as a family. It's a resource that is within reach for many families, even if you use it for coaching.
Yeah. And it sounds like the right care manager is going to be understanding of that, where somebody is really pushing you to do something that you can't afford probably is going to be the wrong person for you in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Anyways.
Right. Yeah, and it's important. That's one of the reasons that we do a meet and greet at Aging Gracefully. You want a good fit with your care manager, just like you would with any other professional that you're working with, a counselor, your attorney, anybody that you're working with. You want to make sure that you like them, that you feel comfortable with them. I mean, it's a pretty intimate service. We're talking about your life, we're talking about your finances, we're talking about your housing, we're working with your family. And so if you don't feel comfortable with your care manager, you need to interview some other care managers. And that's really important.
Yeah, and I always like to bring in the thought of mental load, because when you're thinking about the cost, financially, it might be a little on the higher side for some families. However, you're talking about taking away a significant mental load from people who, again, sandwich generation, if we're here and we've got children to run around to activities and to take care of, then, the cost of the service is hugely worth it to be able to take that mental load off of a caregiver.
Sure. Even if you just think about it, taking this big mammoth amount of information and boiling it down and saying, okay, this is a service you probably need. Here are 3 that are reputable that you should call. That just saved a lot of time for you, right? I explained it to you. I told you who's reputable. I gave you those phone numbers. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, it can make you more efficient because you're not having to educate yourself on what are these different entities. And like I said in the beginning, who does what, who pays for it, who's good at it. Those are things that even if we're just coaching you, we can help you with.
Can you tell us a couple success stories?
Oh, I think some of the stories that come to my mind off the top of my head are families that live far away. We have a good number of families where everyone lives out of town. And that particularly resonates with me because I live in St. Louis and I'm from Louisiana. So my family is out of town. So I know what it's like to be far away. And people sound pretty good on the phone, but you don't know what they look like. So I've had a couple of children that lived in California where I took care of their parents for many years. And so it's just a joy to have many years of working with a family and talking with them, but giving them that peace of mind of, I saw your parent today and he looked good. He's doing okay. Or being able to show up at the emergency room when they're not able to be there and say, I'm going to stay here and make sure everything's okay, and give that feedback. I think those places where I know a family member is far away and I'm able to talk to them on the phone and give them some peace of mind, those are places where it feels very rewarding. You know, we're taking care of people, and I think I know what that feels like as someone who lives far away from family, just to have somebody else telling me your parent's okay or your family member's okay.
Yeah, and that's another part of the value here. That peace of mind is huge, huge.
Can you imagine the price of getting on a plane for an emergency room visit?
Wild.
Well, and just the price, and also just the amount of time it takes you to get there, you know? And so having somebody that can be in that gap until you're able to get there yourself. You know, I think just helping families too, where mom or dad is a hard person to interact with. And maybe that parent has been even abusive or unkind to you, but not so much to me or one of my care managers. We don't have that dynamic between us. And so, you know, I have had a couple of clients that I've taken care of for a long time that were just not very kind to their family members. And so it was rewarding to be able to be that buffer and do that for them and to manage some of the hard things so that their interactions with their parents were good and safer. So those sorts of things I love about my job. I love people, so I love hearing their stories, and I've met lots of people that have had really interesting lives. And so, you know, I never get tired of hearing people's stories and hearing what they've seen and done and about their lives.
And I love the name of your company, Aging Gracefully. It's just so pretty. Can you tell us how that kind of came about?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. People will often ask me, like, am I aging gracefully? Or they'll tell me they're aging gracefully. And sometimes people ask me if we sell skincare, which is funny since I basically just use Dove soap. So no, I would not be good at it. So aging gracefully, we're 16 this year. And like I said, I'm from a small town, tight-knit family. And when I wanted to start a business, I was asking my family, like, what do you think we should name the business? And I'm pretty sure that my sister came up with the name Aging Gracefully. So it was kind of a constant, we were coming up with it, and Aging Gracefully just resonated with me. I liked it. And I often think of my grandmother. Her name was Bootsy. When I think about what I'm doing, she's kind of my avatar. She's the person that I think about, and she just aged really gracefully. She was a beautiful, elegant Southern woman. And so when I think about aging gracefully, I'm always thinking I want to take care of people like I would take care of Bootsy, or I would want Bootsy to be taken care of. And so since she's sort of what I have in mind, Aging Gracefully feels like the perfect name.
I love that, Melanie.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And join us next time for We're at the Age.
Bye.
Are you looking to connect with a community who understands the unique challenges of caregiving? Then we want to partner with you. By sponsoring We're at the Age, you'll connect with a dedicated audience of listeners and help make a real difference for those managing the challenges of elder care. We're at the Age is a perfect fit for your sponsorship. Reach out today to learn more about sponsoring an episode or the whole season. Visit voicestl.org/podcast for more information.